from the Ticats Audio Network. This is the CFL This Week with Bubba O'Neil.
1/3 through the CFL season, and the only thing we know for sure is that the Winnipeg Blue Bombers are on the right track for a three-peat. As for everyone else, well, folks, you might as well just bring on Week 9. Welcome to the CFL This Week. I'm your host, Bubba O'Neil. This week on the podcast, she is the deputy editor from CFL.ca. Welcome back for a second season, Kristina Costabile.
Thanks so much. So excited to be here.
Nice, great to have you. From 630 Chat in Edmonton, he is the voice of the Elks, Morley. Scott, great to see you.
Good to be here. Thanks for the invite.
And no doubt he's the CFL top dog from Canadian Press. Say hi there, Mr. Dan Ralph.
Good morning, and glad to be here as well.
Right on. All right, guys, let's talk some CFL, and in particular the CFL East. The Ticats win, the Alouettes lose. Redblacks win their first. Argonauts lose. Kristina, who is the team to fear in the East?
This is such an interesting question because I feel like from all four teams, we've seen some good stuff and we've seen some really bad stuff. And I don't think that there has been a clear front runner yet. I think we've seen some good stuff from Montreal, and then we haven't. We've seen Ottawa. I think Ottawa was better than their record. I think a lot of people could probably agree with that. Toronto's been good in some instances, and then we saw on Sunday night, not so good. And Ticats have been in the same boat. But if I had to choose one, I think Hamilton is probably my leader right now. I think the last little stretch of games, they won 2 of their last 3. Dane has kind of gotten his interceptions under control. He had 1 in the last 3 games. If they can stop shooting themselves in the foot in the second half, but more in particular the fourth quarter, I think this team is really good. And I think they have an opportunity ahead of themselves when they're playing a bunch of East opponents in the next, 6 games or 7 games, that they can really pull themselves in the front runner. But right now, I just feel like it's such a logjam that I just don't know which one of these teams is really kind of going out into the front.
Morley, from the west side of things, what are you seeing in the East?
Well, I think, let's be honest, guys, the most dangerous team in the East is the team that finishes 4th in the West, is it not? Because they'll cross over and maybe have a free path to the Grey Cup. I'm not sure, although I know it's never been done before, but it always seems to be set up that way. The East is a mystery. At least over the weekend, they got enough wins to pass the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in wins. They have now 8, and the Bombers have 7. So, yeah, it's a mystery to me. I mean, to me, Hamilton's is the best team there. They have the best chance, I think, to turn things around, and when they all start to play each other, which is coming up now, they'll get probably the majority of the wins, and I think they will still finish first. I still think they have probably the best team in the East, but I don't know if any of them would have much of an opportunity against whatever Western team crosses over. But still, that's a story for October and November, right?
Dan, I mean, I know you've seen the Ticats, you've seen the Argonauts a lot, and I think it's easy to say the Ticats based on talent, but they certainly haven't proven it.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm going to stay squarely on the fence, only because I think
the fence.
The fence. Only because this stretch is going to determine a lot. Like, I remember saying last week that the next 7 of 8 for Toronto was against the East, 4 against Hamilton, 3 against Ottawa, and we were going to see whether they were going to separate or whether they were going to stay with the pack. And if they stay with the pack and have to go out west, I don't like their chances. I really don't. I like Hamilton's team on paper, but until such time as that team can show that it stops shooting itself in the foot, like my 2 esteemed colleagues have mentioned prior, I'm not ready to anoint anybody in the East the team to watch. I thought Montreal was going to beat Hamilton last week, so what do I know? I just think really it's such a crapshoot, and I think all we know for sure is that the top 2 teams are going to make the playoffs, and you better be in the top 2 or else you're going to be on the outside looking in.
You said an interesting word there, Dan, anoint. And I guess I'm presuming that anointed as the number 1 quarterback in Hamilton is Dane Evans. But in that win over Montreal, we saw a whole lot of Matthew Schiltz. And that's raising a lot of questions, and people are starting to take sides. And I think that's just a natural thing from a fan perspective. And I think the Ticats are looking at it as more of a strategy. Dan's definitely got the better arm. Matthew probably has the better legs. What are they doing there?
Well, I think they're doing whatever it takes to win. When you're 1-5, and your starter's got 1 win in 6, I think you do what you got to do. And I mean, there's been some problems with the offense this year. I mean, the offense can't run. It doesn't score consistently. So I really think that they're leaving every rock unturned to try and find out what would work, what doesn't work. I'll be honest with you. I'm not a coach. I'm not a coordinator. I'm not a fan of that flip flop, because it does create situations where now all of a sudden you've got fans taking sides. And let's face it, when you're struggling, the number 2 quarterback is always number 1 in the hearts of fans. So, but I guess, you know what, whatever you need to do to finish first in the East, if they all of a sudden put 5, 6, 7 wins together and separate from the East, then I'll eat my words. But I'm not a real fan of the quarterback switching all the time.
Kristina, what do you think?
Yeah, I see where Dan's coming from, but I kind of like it just in the sense of, again, I'm not a coach either, but when you're throwing something a little bit different at a defense, and if you're not expecting it, maybe they're planning for Dane, and then you have a Matthew Schultz come in and he's more of a runner, and maybe that kind of messes up the defense. But I also kind of like that Tommy Condell, I think, has been the only offensive coordinator this year to have the 2 quarterbacks on the field with that new rule. And I've kind of liked that. I think one of them worked, one of them maybe didn't, but I thought that was interesting. And again, you're kind of grasping at straws at this point. Obviously, everything up until that point hasn't been working. So if you have somebody like Matthew, who is a skilled quarterback, and you have a second quarterback, it's kind of reminding me a little bit of the Bombers a couple of years ago, where they had Chris Strevler come in as that more of like a mobile running quarterback. So if that's going to work, it worked for them at that point. Obviously, this is not the same caliber team as that Bombers team that won the Grey Cup, but if you're going to try something, you might as well give it a shot. And Matthew's proved that he's been able to move the ball effectively when he has been put in for situations.
Morley, I think there's that old saying that if you're using 2 quarterbacks, you don't have one.
That's very true. And in a quarterback-driven league, as they call it, you have to find who the one is. And like the other guys, I'm not a big fan of just switching back and forth. I like the idea of having a guy with legs come in on a third down, get the conversion, and then stay in for a couple of plays and have a package for him. And I know the Elks plan, when everybody's healthy, is to try and do that possibly with Trey Ford. But yeah, it's not a recipe for success, really. I think if you look back over the years, I can't remember the last time that there's really been a team that has had 2 quarterbacks going in and out like that, and it actually worked for them. And just to the other point, I know you're talking about the 2 quarterbacks in the field. The Elks, ironically, have pretty much done that every offensive play this year, because they've got Kai Loxley lining up as a receiver, but only once have they really used him in a trick situation where they allowed him to throw the ball. That was a couple of weeks ago, but it does open up the book for you. But if that other quarterback can't do something else on the field, then you're just running with 2 quarterbacks and not enough receivers, right? The difference, I think, with Loxley is he can run and he can catch passes and he runs routes and blocks and everything, but he can also throw the ball downfield if the situation warrants it. But they're in no way, in a situation where they're going back and forth with guys. What Hamilton's doing now, it's winning, right? They won with it, so you got to keep going with it until you figure out what's better and what works better. But I don't think it's something that will sustain them long term.
For the CFL trivia buffs out there, I had to go do some research in terms of the Tiger Cats and a 2 quarterback system. And they haven't really done this. And they've been having that sort of number 1 guy for a long time. You'd have to go back to 2007, where they split with Quentin Porter and Kevin Glenn. And before that, Ken Hobart and Kerrigan they led them to the Grey Cup in '86. So you'd have to go that far back to I think the Argos had it there with Barnes and Holloway, and that goes way back. But I mean, yeah, it just doesn't seem to happen in the CFL where the 2 quarterback system actually goes out there. Dan, I mean, the guys, the Argos and the Ticats are set to face off 4 times in the next 5 weeks, which sounds more like baseball to me, really. Kristina, I mean, I've asked players straight up, do you expect to get sick of the guy that you line up against? And there's a lot of head shaking, as in yeses. What do you think about this new sort of scheduling? I know that the Ticats in particular played a lot of West games in that first third of the season, and it's a whole lot of East. But in terms of facing the Argonauts 4 times in the next 5 weeks, your thoughts?
I think there's two ways to look at this. One is the pure football standpoint. And like you were just mentioning, I think these guys are going to get sick of playing each other. And it's probably a challenge for offense and defensive coordinators as well to, change up your playbook at least a little bit, add in some new things. So you're going to be always thinking about that, right? So that part, I don't really love it for them. I'm assuming that it's probably going to be annoying. By game 4, there's going to be some heat on the field, I would assume. But as a fan standpoint, what are the games that everyone loves the most? The rivalry games, Labor Day weekend, Banjo Bowl, Battle of Alberta. Those are the ones that people like to watch because they like to hate other people. That's what it is. You want to get mad at the fans in the stands that are there for the other team. And this one, we know Hamilton and Toronto is probably the most heated rivalry in the league, minus maybe Winnipeg, Saskatchewan, that people get really into it, especially because Hamilton is so close to Toronto, Toronto's so close to Hamilton. So I think from a standpoint, this is probably going to be really fun, especially when you know that each team's fan bases are going to be traveling down the QEW to both of the games. But from a pure football standpoint, it's going to be interesting to see if these guys can keep their tempers down, because they already hate each other. And if you're seeing the same guy lining up across from you 4 times in 5 games, I think it's going to be a little bit of a crazy experience for sure.
A crazy situation. And sure,
Yeah.
Morley, are the Elks and Stamps doing the same sort of thing?
They're doing the home and home and Labor Day. They play 4 times. They've already played twice this year. I'm a big fan of back-to-backs, but I don't like what we're going through, what we're seeing right now with this situation. I think it's, Kristina, you made a great point. Those games are the games that the fans look forward to. But now it's just another Argos Ticats game because we've just seen 4 in the last 5 weeks. And, the Labor Day games are always special in Alberta. The return match in Edmonton has always been, that's the game of the season. That's the game everybody marks in their calendar. But when that game hits now on the Saturday after Labor Day, it'll be the second time the Stampeders have been to Edmonton. It'll be the 4th time they've played each other in basically the first half of the season. And in a 9-team league, I don't think you need that. I'm a big proponent of playing everybody home and away. And then you throw in those extra, with the extra couple of games, you throw in your rivalry games. I don't think there's a reason why the Elks shouldn't be going to Toronto this year and why some teams aren't coming to Edmonton. I think every fan base should get to see every team at least once a year. And I think playing, I would rather see the Argos or whatever team's not coming to my city come to my city instead of seeing the Hamilton Tiger Cats for a 3rd time in my city. That's the way I think. I love back-to-backs. I don't like playing teams 4 times a year, though. 3 times is good with your rivalry teams, and you kind of rotate those through, and so they're still special games, but 4 times is too much.
Dan?
Agreed. I think it's too much of a good thing too quickly. I mean, I love rivalry games. To me, 2 of these games should have been at the end of the season when the games really, really mean something in the standings. Now, if whoever wins this season's series, in my mind, it's I don't want to say it's anticlimactic because the games will mean something, but they're going to be playing West teams. I'd rather see Hamilton and Toronto decide 1st, 2nd, or 3rd in the East late in the season. I don't know what value there is in playing Hamilton 4 times in the next 7 weeks. Playing Ottawa 3 times in the next 8 weeks as well over that span. To me, it's too much of a good thing. I'm with Morley. I like rivalry games. I like the back-to-back rather. And on Labor Day, to me, it's tailor-made. You get to have the Labor Day experience in one city and then 6 days later have the Labor Day experience in the other. And then let's leave it alone. Let it percolate for a while. Let's see what the games mean. But playing 4 times before Labor Day by Labor Day or by the end of or the middle of September, I don't know. I kind of like to think those games would mean more in October and November than they do now.
Kristina, I'm kind of in the fence on this. I always go on the fence here for something like this here, but I think it's interesting that the only thing I don't like about it, and Morley, you just brought that up, is we have this guy, Nathan Rourke, who's, I guess in this side of the country, we say he's from Oakville, Ontario, and we don't get to see him in Hamilton.
That's
right?
a shame. That's a shame. There's always
Morley,
a great player in the league, and everybody should get to see him. Think about back in the day when, go back to when Rocket Ishmael was here. Can you imagine if Toronto never made the trip into some city that year with John Candy, with Wayne Gretzky, with Bruce McNullen and Rocket Ishmael? It would have been an absolute crime. Now we have the best story in the Canadian Football League this year, and BC's not going to Hamilton. I don't know where else they're not going, but they're not going to Hamilton. They don't get a chance to see him. And it's just not right. I mean, every team should get to see, every fan base should get to see every team. It's something I beat the drum on every year, and it just doesn't make sense, especially in a 9-team league, right?
Agreed.
Yeah, that's a tough one there. And I would consider that probably, I mean, considering the distance from Hamilton to Oakville, that would have been almost a homecoming for him as well, too. So kind of.
And there's also, a franchise out there that doesn't get Saskatchewan for a home game too, right? So basically, when you look at the league this year, the two biggest stories, Saskatchewan always sells extra tickets. Nathan Rourke is selling tickets possibly, right? And some teams, there's a team out there, I don't know which one it is, but they're not going to get Saskatchewan as the visitor this year, and they don't sell those tickets to all those Rider fans who live in their area, and let's be honest, we know when Saskatchewan comes to town, teams like it because it sells tickets.
Absolutely. Kind of the National Hockey League way of thinking of things with building these rivalries. And I mean, that's certainly up for debate. Let's see what the CFL does in 2023. Let's stick with the Tiger Cats in a sense that they played this crazy, insane game against the Montreal Alouettes. And maybe the most controversial play of the game is the second to last play where the quarterback, Trevor Harris, seemed to be hit in the lower neck area, somewhere in the shoulder area. Stavros Kastatenis, the safety, is called 15 yards, roughing the passer. And what we're going to call him the concussion spotter calls the referee down, and Trevor Harris is removed from the field, Dan. And the Montreal Alouettes are livid, and so is Trevor Harris. Did the league get this right here?
I see the rationale. I understand the rationale. I don't agree with Trevor on this. I don't think you leave it up to the player to make the decision, because the player is going to tell you what the player wants you to hear.
The player's never going to want to get off the field.
Yeah, but I mean, we watched him getting off the field, and there were a couple steps where I thought he looked a little wobbly. Now, whether that was his knees, I don't know. I will. 51% of me says the league got it right. 49% of me says if the player comes up and he seems to be talking well, and maybe you let him. But Jesus, I would hate to be wrong on this, and then on the next play he take a shot that costs him the rest of the season or potentially his career. So I will say 51% of me says they got it right, and they saved the player from himself.
Morley, what do you think about this?
Player's always going to want to stay in, so you can't ask the player. But then a guy sitting up in the press box shouldn't be able to make that decision either. There's got to be a better way. Right now, this is the way they do it, and it's probably the best way to do it and the only way they can do it right now. But I think I don't have the answers. I just have the questions like everybody else. I just think it just seems unfair that that happens. On the other hand, though, if that play happened in the second quarter, nobody bats an eye, right? It's just more the timing of when it happened as to how it happened and the process that they go through. So that tells me that maybe it's the right decision. It impacted the game more because it was, in the last minute of play and they were charging and looking for a touchdown. So to me, it's probably the way they have to go right now because it's the only way to do it. I mean, we saw the hit, and as soon as I saw the hit, I go, oh, that's a bad hit. That's got to hurt. And then I was surprised he got up as quickly as he did, and he seemed okay, but you can't take the player's word for it. So it's not a perfect system, that's for sure, but it's the only one they have in place. And it's until they figure out a better way to do it, it's the way they got to do it moving forward, I think, because you have to protect the player. The league's in a no-win situation, right? They take them out and they get criticized. They leave them in, and there's going to be a faction of people that criticize them as well. So they're really in a tough situation with this, and they have to just kind of sit down and figure out a better way to handle it.
Kristina, a couple of things here to think about or speak about is I thought it was, pretty gutty or pretty honest of Milt Stiegel on the TSN panel to say that was not a rough play hit. And when I looked at it, I think when you look at it the first time, you're like, ooh, nasty head-on-head hit. And really, he did not, the safety did not hit Harris in the head, hit him in the back. And it looked worse, obviously, than it actually was. So that was tough. And How do you feel if you're Dominic Davis? Like you've been sitting around all game long, the big climax of the game, and you're expected to, on the final play of the game, throw a touchdown pass.
Yeah, I think my point too is what Morley had said in that situation as well, is like the situation of the game is what made it even worse, is because there was the only one, one play left, and Trevor gets taken out and Dom's there and being like, okay, like this is the time to now hopefully tie the game up. And obviously he didn't. But that is what kind of put a little bit more of a spotlight on it, in my opinion. But when I look at it, whether they got it right or not, player safety needs to be number one. And in that moment, there was somebody who was thinking about the well-being of Trevor Harris. And that is what we all should be thinking about. And at that moment, that was the right decision to take him out of the game. Whether it is or not, now that we've watched the replay 900,000 times and we've all talked about it and everyone's tweeting about it and Milt's talking about it on the panel, in that moment, somebody or a group of people were worried about the well-being of Trevor Harris. And to me, that's the most important thing, is the health of our athletes. So if that was in the moment where he had to be taken out of the game, it definitely sucked for the Alouettes at that moment, especially because they were driving down the field, and maybe the outcome of that game was different if Trevor stayed in, and maybe he does throw a touchdown pass. I don't know, but I think player safety needs to be number one. And in that moment, that was the right decision.
And everyone who has an opinion on it got to watch the replay 2 or 3 times,
Exactly.
right? The guy who had to make the decision didn't have that opportunity, right?
Yeah.
He had to make a pretty quick decision. And I think in those situations, you probably have to err on the side of caution more so, right?
But Dan, should that be in the hands of the referee who's closer to the situation?
Well, I wonder if they forced the concussion individual's hand by calling a UR on the play. If there's no UR, maybe it goes as just a play. But because it was a UR and it was against the quarterback, maybe that forces you to err on the side of caution.
Guys, should the referee be making these calls? Morley?
I don't know. Like Dan says, he called unnecessary roughness. If he now makes the call that he can stay in, maybe it tarnishes the call he just made and doesn't make him, makes him look bad, right? So the referee's already kind of made his decision that it was a bad hit, right? I don't know if there's a way that the both teams' trainers, it would take too long to do it correctly, right? To assess the player, give them 30 or 40 seconds or whatever it is to assess the player on field with trainers, coaches, doctors. I don't know that. I guess that would just take up too much time, especially at that situation, right? And then if they still took him out, it's still a bad situation for everybody. So I like I said, I got lots of questions. I don't have any answers to how they can make this system better.
Kristina, you're actually correct on this. Player safety always of paramount. But do you see a better way of doing this in terms of? I mean, it's done in hockey this way, but is this the proper way for football?
I think at this point, yes. Again, I'm with Morley. I don't have the answers to all of this. I mean, there's a lot of people who have a lot more experience and knowledge in this area than I do. But I don't know. I think this is the way you have to do it. And we've always talked about, I know this has been something to speed the game up. So if you want this to be a quick decision, that person that's watching the replay is only going to watch it once, twice, maybe. But if you want to have the game sped up, you can't have 30, 40 seconds of someone checking the player on the field. You can't have 4 or 5 different people coming in and watching the same replay to give, enough of an idea of what everyone's thinking. So I think as of right now, yeah, this is the way it needs to be. I don't think it should be the ref either. We were talking about a little bit earlier is, you need to see it a second time. We all know football moves really quickly, and he did call unnecessary roughness, but in order to see where the hit was, what Trevor was looking like when he got up, maybe the ref didn't exactly see what he was doing, didn't look at his eyes or whatever it may be. I think you do need the eye in the sky to look at it for a second time, but I don't know if there's a better way at this moment.
Guys, let's go to the West. And I don't know if there's panic, but I mean, some of the online stuff I'm seeing in Saskatchewan and Regina is certainly panic. And the Rough Riders didn't look good in the second half, playing in a loss to the Lions. And in particular, Cody Fajara, for the second week, or at least the second game in a row that he's played, has thrown a questionable pass that's intercepted that basically has sealed the deal for the other team. Where are we with Cody Fajara right now? Morley, like, you see him the most. I mean, I think there was a time maybe 2 years ago we were talking about him as one of the elite passers or at least elite quarterbacks in the league. Are you still feeling the same way?
It's Cody Fajardo is a guy to me who has big upside and big downside. I mean, he throws interceptions. He sometimes makes bad decisions, but man, he makes plays. He's tough as nails. He makes plays. He's gotten it out through a bad knee injury right now. But I'm not sure if he's as good as the Saskatchewan fan base thinks he is. I know we had that the off-season kind of tete-a-tete with him and Chris Jones after Chris Jones made some comments about him going back to his time in Saskatchewan. I just think that I just think that he's not as good as Saskatchewan wants him to be. He's a good quarterback, and I mean, he threw for 5,000 yards. He led the league. He was an MOP candidate. I mean, he's got it. There's no doubt about it, but he doesn't have it on that consistent level, I don't think. And I think honestly as well, he's got a bad team around him at times right now, especially on the O-line. And, you know, they're leaking pretty bad in the last couple of games. And I think that's made him look worse than he is. So there's something they got to deal with in Saskatchewan. They've got issues there with him. They've got issues with their discipline. They've got issues with their O-line. They probably are pretty happy to have the bye week this week so they can try and sort some of these things out. And I mean, let's be honest, if Edmonton can go to BC and win, which is a tall order, obviously, they're playing Saskatchewan next in Edmonton, and that's an opportunity for Edmonton to move into a tie with Saskatchewan for fourth place in the West. So after a horrible start by the Elks and a good start by the Riders, they've kind of come together a little bit in the standings. So there's going to be some pressure in Saskatchewan coming out of the bye week. There's no doubt about that. But Fajardo's a good quarterback. I think he can do it, but I think he's got to have everything right around him to do that.
Before we go to Kristina on that, on this, Morley, can you just refresh us here? Because maybe I needed to be refreshed about the Chris Jones situation and Cody. What were the words there?
Well, it wasn't really between the two of them. There were some words in an interview Chris Jones talked about. I think it was more about Stephen McAdoo and when McAdoo got released. And I think Jones said, and I'm just trying to dig back in the memory banks for the most part on this. He just said something about what a good job that McAdoo did with Fajardo, and he kind of referenced the fact that he got more out of Fajardo than he probably had, and I think that got the fan base upset a little bit in Saskatchewan. Got some people in Saskatchewan a little bit upset, so they started to go back and forth a little bit. He wasn't actually talking about Fajardo, but it got taken about Fajardo, and then Fajardo was asked about it, and they had some comments going back and forth. That was in the off season. I believe they've kissed and made up right now, but we'll see moving forward how Fajardo comes out of this.
Chris Jones firing up people. That's a surprise. Kristina, your thoughts on Cody?
Yeah, so I agree with Morley. I do think Cody's a good quarterback. I think he can use his legs when obviously he doesn't have a knee injury. He can make plays. You know, we've seen it time and time and again, even though he lost those last two Western finals. I feel like he played really good in both of those games against Winnipeg. But I totally agree. I think it's the guys around him. I think Saskatchewan's O-line is probably the worst one in the league. I'm going to go out there and say it. They've given up the most sacks. I feel like Cody's scrambling, running for his life. And he's not able to make those throws. And then when he does make those throws, some of his receivers have dropped balls. So if you don't have the guys that are around you to put you in a position to succeed, of course, the fan base is going to be like, you're the worst quarterback ever. We need to cut you. I saw the same thing on Twitter. I was reading through some Saskatchewan fans calling for his head, which I think is way too premature. I don't think that Cody is a bad quarterback. He's not a Zach Collaros, but he still is a good quarterback, and he has the skills to win. It's just they need to fix up their O-line. Of course, they've had some injuries as well, but I think that is where it starts and ends. We know football, is won and lost in the trenches for the most part. And in this one, I feel like Cody isn't able to make his reads quick enough before he gets sacked or he has to run for his life.
Dan, he's getting shredded. Like, I don't know if you've seen, and I know social media is social media. That's okay. We can admit to this, but I mean, he's getting shredded.
Well, I mean, my two esteemed colleagues said it too. I mean, when you win, you're the greatest thing from sliced bread. When you're losing, the number two quarterback's the number one guy. I have no problem with Cody Fajardo being the quarterback of the Saskatchewan Roughriders. This year, he's been playing on that bum leg since week 2, and you put any quarterback in that position, you're hurting. You put a mobile quarterback in that position, and I think you just basically tie one hand behind his back. And as Morley and Kristina have both said, the offensive line in front of him is not affording the consistent protection that you'd want. I have no problem with him, none whatsoever. I think he is an upper echelon quarterback in this league. Is he the top quarterback? No, but is he better than anything that we've seen in the East here when healthy? I would argue that. And I think there's 2 quarterbacks ahead of him, and those are the 2 quarterbacks leading the teams 1 and 2 in the West. But I have no problem with him as the quarterback, none whatsoever.
Yeah.
I think he's courageous. I think he's tough. I think he can make the big play. And if I have one criticism of him, sometimes maybe I feel he tries to take too much on himself instead of just take what the defense gives you and live to play another down. I think he tries too hard, and I'll take that in a quarterback 9 times out of 10. I have no qualms.
That's all bang on, Dan, for sure. I mean, what I'd like to see from Cody Fajardo is for him to get a chance to be a quarterback. Right now, he's worried about, getting sacked all the time, and he's running all the time, and he's not allowed to make his reads. He's not allowed to throw the ball deep because he doesn't get time to do it. He's proven in the past he can be a really good quarterback. And the problem right now is he's just not getting a chance to play the way he can play.
And he's playing hurt. Let's call a spade a spade. He's playing hurt. And I mean, I will never, ever, ever, ever doubt a quarterback's courage watching him doing what he's doing.
Yep.
Never.
Kristina, he had a near meltdown at the end of the season. The guy was in tears about his wanting to win a Grey Cup for the province of Saskatchewan. And I guess to see him right now, where you're almost seeing the loss of confidence in his eyes right now. And that's from a television perspective. I can only imagine what it's like when you're on the field.
Yeah. And I think to Dan's point too, like he is just one of those guys who cares. He wants to do everything. He wants to win. And you see it when I was at that post game after he had lost in the West Final last year. And it was devastating. Like I felt for him. And why do you not want someone like that on your team who cares and who wants to be there and is, somebody who people can follow, and he's a leader. And I feel like you're right. The confidence might not be there for him right now. I think, again, the knee thing has obviously been bugging him all year. And, how could you not be frustrated when you don't have time to do anything? And like, obviously he's not one of those guys who points fingers. We know that about Cody. He says, it's me. I'm not pointing fingers, but you have to think a little bit in his head that he's like, man, like, can I catch a break for like 1 second? I would love to be able to, put the ball in my receiver's hands, but I just don't have time to do it.
Yeah. Well, I guess the fans of Saskatchewan have to realize that Ken Austin or Ron Lancaster aren't coming through the door anytime. So, I mean, this is what they got, right?
That's the other question, right? Who's the alternative right now? I don't think they have anyone on their roster that's better than Cody Fajardo, so you got to stick with him. And I mean, quarterbacks have peaks and valleys, right? Every quarterback has. I mean, because of injuries, it wasn't too long ago, everyone was convinced that Zach Calera should retire. Now he's the best player in the league, right? I mean, every quarterback goes through those ups and downs in his career. And because of things that he really can't control, like the O-line and the injuries, he's going through one of those downs right now.
Yeah. And right, I mean, what does Saskatchewan do? Do they make a trade for Vernon Adams? That's not applicable either, because a new quarterback comes in. It takes him a while to learn. He's got to learn on the job. Maybe you put him in too early before, and you just got a quagmire there. So you know what? You got a number one quarterback. Roll with him, man.
Isn't Vernon the kind of same quarterback though? Like,
well, yeah, but he's healthy. And all you do is create a quarterback controversy.
Yeah. The upgrade is he's healthy. That's about it. I mean, if you're choosing between Cody Fajardo and Vernon Adams, I don't know how much of a difference there is. The only difference is they're healthy. You got to give something up for them. You got to disrupt team chemistry. And then you, like you say, then you create a quarterback controversy when Fajardo gets healthy again.
Yeah.
Last one to you, Kristina, on this one here. I mean, they're a 500 ball club right now. I don't think anyone thought that, but I guess expectations should be lowered, I guess, at this point.
For the Riders, I think so, yeah. I mean, and then they also lost to Toronto, and we've all talked kind of those back-to-backs. I feel like if you can't beat Toronto at this point, like they haven't been that great of a ball club either. Like maybe you aren't the ones that are the best in the West. But again, the crossover, they probably make playoffs. But I feel like the 3 teams that are ahead of them right now deserve to be there. And I just don't know if the Riders are as good as everyone has been saying they were, especially at the beginning portion of the league or the season.
The fun part about this program and this podcast is that we get to predict stuff and we get to throw out opinions. Dan, you're laughing, and you're going to start with this. If you were handing out, if it was a 1-vote situation, and I know the Canadian football reporters of Canada hate me for this one, but you right now you're the voter. Give me the MOP of the CFL right now.
Well, I will preface this by saying this. I never start thinking about these awards until after Labor Day, to be honest. But if I had to, the kid in BC would have my vote, hands down, not even close.
Wow.
Yeah.
Why?
Because he's the most valuable player on that team. I could make the argument in Winnipeg, the quarterback is important, but I wonder if I could win 4 games behind that offensive line and with that defense. And I'm not begrudging what Zach has done. Trust me, I think he's the best quarterback in the league right now, but his supporting cast is solid, very solid. Injuries notwithstanding. Nathan's had to do without Brian Burnham for much of the season. We've seen Dominique Grimes step up and be a number 1 receiver. But I just think the kid is dynamic. He does it all. He can do it with his legs. He can do it with his arms. He's got the right mindset, in my mind, to be a number 1 quarterback. And that if he throws 4 touchdown passes, that's good. We won. And if he throws 4 interceptions, I think he discards that as quickly as he does the TDs. I'm bullish on Nathan Rourke. I think he's going to be a very, very good quarterback. I think he's the face of the franchise already. And that's saying something. 6 games into his stewardship as a starter, I would give it to Nathan.
Kristina, your vote, please.
My vote is for Zach Collaros. I just feel, statistically, of course, he's having a great season. He's leading the league in yards. I think he has 15 touchdown passes to 5 interceptions. But to me, it's the other stuff he's doing. Those crazy plays where he's falling down, still completing passes. He's Houdiniing himself out of the pocket if there is any sort of pressure to make the throw downfield. I just think he's doing everything that we obviously want in a quarterback. I've never seen Zach play at this level in my time covering this league. And I feel like his record alone, just as a Blue Bomber, to me just is crazy, the amount that he's won there. And I do agree with Dan. He does have a great supporting cast, great O-line, all of those things. But, they're still not going to win without a Zach. And how do you still win a game when you've only completed 7 passes? It's still, to me, everything he does, I just find myself always saying, wow, this guy is it. So my vote is for sure for Zach Collaros.
Mr. Scott, you have the deciding vote here.
I get to break the tie, eh?
Yes.
Well, I'm going to use a famous quote. Going to Winnipeg. I think Zach Collaros, and with all due respect to Nathan Rourke, who's probably going to win the MOP at some point or more than one point in his career, he's done a great job, and he's a spectacular story this year. Collaros is unbeaten, and he beat Rourke in one of those wins. And I think you just have to give it to him because of that. I know at the end of the season that Zach Collaros is going to be playing this way. You can't convince me yet that Nathan Rourke is going to be playing the same way he's playing now at the end of the season. Defensive coordinators are getting more tape on him. They're getting more of a read on how he plays and what he does. Everybody knows Zach Collaros, and they know what his MO is, and they know how he plays. They still can't stop him though. And I think, to me, that's that right now. I may have a different vote in November, but right now for me, it's got to be Zach Collaros, because he's just keeps doing it game in and game out. And like you say, he can do it with 300 yards and 25 completions, or he can do it with 100 and some yards and 7 completions, because I saw that a couple of weeks ago. And even though the team didn't play that well, he won them a football game. He made the plays when he had to make the plays and got the points they needed to get. And to me, that's what an MOP does.
Dan, you've been fortunate to cover him as an Argonaut and a Tiger Cat. I think we can go back. I believe it was 2014 when he had that first breakout with the Tiger Cats, his second season, playing at a level that was going to easily win him the MOP, and then he blows out the knee. I'm just saying, from my opinion here, he's playing better than that right now.
I would agree with you wholeheartedly. I think he's playing with savvy that 8 years in this league would give you from then to now. 7 years, 7 seasons, 8 seasons. And I mean, I don't disagree with what Morley and Kristina are saying, but my point is, at this point in time, I expect this from Zach. I do. And the times that he doesn't play up to that level, he's got a supporting cast that can sort of plateau and give him the time to make the play. I'm not sure the kid in BC has that. But I agree with you. There's no doubt. I mean, if I was picking one player to be my quarterback, it wouldn't even be close. Wouldn't be close. He's got the intangibles. He's the leader. He can make plays, and his players love him. And I can see why, because we love him.
You know, Kristina, Dan brings up a great point there about the surrounding cast and all. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that the running game and the offensive line, I mean, the offensive line's definitely improved with the Lions, but it also might have cut the career of Mike Riley a little shorter than expected, because it was such a poor offensive line and he took so many hits. So I think it's improved, or I think the running game's improved, but certainly not to what Winnipeg has.
Yeah, exactly. And I think too, the other thing is the other side of the ball. Even when Winnipeg's offense isn't clicking as much, their defense is winning them games. And I believe that the Lions have a good defense, but I don't think that they're going to be those game-changing defenses like Winnipeg has. But I feel like with BC as well, their running game is good, and I feel like their receivers are great too, and that's obviously helping Nathan as well. So he's putting the ball in the right spot, and these guys are making crazy grabs. Even without a Brian Burnham, you see Keon Hatcher doing crazy things. Javon Katoy, the list goes on. Like, these guys are getting in position to help Nathan succeed. Not that Winnipeg doesn't have that, but I think that that's helping Nathan as well, because he can put the ball and know that his receivers are going to get it.
When healthy, that Lucky Whitehead is as scary as it can get. I wouldn't want to be a DB watching him there, Morley. So yeah, yes, there's definitely I guess what's around him as well too. But yeah, you're right. This kid, he may win 2 or 3 of these at some point in his career.
Absolutely. But I don't think he can beat Zach Collaros in the vote or in a game this year, right? Especially late in the season. And that's why, to me, it's still Zach Collaros. He's still the best quarterback in the league. And if you're going into a game, BC against Winnipeg, and you can flip quarterbacks, BC might beat Winnipeg, right? Because of Zach Collaros. So I just think he's just too good. He's the best player in the league right now. And until someone proves otherwise, and Rourke's getting pretty close to it, but until someone proves otherwise, my vote still goes with Collaros, who just continues to win and win and win.
And it's interesting, Dan, we talk about these people. I mean, I don't know what's going on with Winnipeg and their ability to plug and play. They let Lawler go, I mean, who was by far the best receiver in the league last year. And then I don't know, did anyone know about what Schoen? Like, where did he come from? Like I mean, and it's Zach making him look good. I can't remember the name of the guy from a couple of weeks ago. Caught I think 90 yards receptions, 2 touchdowns in the back of corner a couple of weeks ago. They're finding these guys that are coming out of nowhere. But I also got to believe that's part of Zach making them look good too. Yeah,
I mean, they go pick up Ellingson, and then 5-6 weeks into the season, Ellingson's the number 1 receiver in the league. Well, gee, you got the number 1 quarterback in the league, so it makes sense. I mean, there's no doubt the quarterback makes the offense go, especially considering outside of last week, the running game has been sporadic. So it's been on Zach's shoulders. I totally get it. But I think this guy, he's playing lights out. But I thought he played lights out last year, and there's a reason why he was the MOP last year. And to me, he's just picked up where he left off. And maybe that's wrong, because I'm comparing him to last year. I mean, you could probably make the argument too, he's better this year because you know what? He's crisper. He's a year into into this system, and he's a year into adjusting to Schoen, adjusting to Ellingson, adjusting to the inconsistencies of the running game without Andrew Harris. So, I get it. I mean, to me, 1 and 1A between those 2 guys. And I think I'm just a little bit more blown away with the young kid in BC than I am the veteran who I think I saw this last year.
Guys, I mean, and I think one final thing about Zach, which Dan, you kind of pointed to there. For someone that's won back-to-back Grey Cups, he looks as hungry as ever. Yeah. That's what kills me. He looks hungry.
That's what I was saying. If I was going to pick one guy to be my quarterback, there'd be no doubt. He'd be the one. I mean, you got to love that guy. But I remember in 2012 when we had him in Toronto, and talking with Scott Milanovich, who was the head coach at the time, he had Ricky Ray, he had Trevor Harris, and he had Zach. And he picked winning qualities for all 3. And the thing he said about Zach is he's from Ohio, he's from Steubenville, and football matters. And we're seeing that. 10 years later, the guy's playing like his life depended on it. But I think football matters to the guy, and we're seeing that.
Final word to you, Kristina.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I think, kind of in the same vein of Cody, where he cares. Zach cares, but he's trying so hard, and he doesn't even really have to try because he's so naturally gifted. And he's just so good at what he does. And I see that fire in him as well. And like, you've won 2 Grey Cups again. And I don't think there's any doubt in Zach's mind that he's going to get a 3rd ring this year. I don't think there's any doubt in his mind, which I think you want as a quarterback. You want someone that is going to be confident and knows that he has the playmakers around him and knows that he's going to be able to help you win at the end of the year. So I agree. I think we are seeing the best of Zach Collaros, and I feel like the rest of even the season, we're probably going to see even more, and it'd be even better than what we've seen in the first third.
Then I'll change my mind.
We've been grinding on you there, Dad.
Come on over, Dad.
Come on, Dad. Morley, final word to you here. I mean, is it fair to say, and we'll open this up a little bit to bigger than Zach. I mean, is it fair to say that we're looking at a three-peat? Like, I mean, is there anyone in the class of the Bombers, or can we look back at the years past? I mean, I don't think about some Calgary teams back in the day that look so much dominant than anyone else, and then somehow they lose in the Western Final. Do we even see that happening? That's
happened for sure. And it's happened to other teams as well, you know, but Winnipeg is just, you know, we've touched on talking about the quarterbacks. I mean, Zach's got such a great cast around him. I mean, he's got that solid O-line. That defense is just unbelievable. And the game we saw here at Commonwealth a couple of weeks ago, where the Elks played pretty well, the Bombers completed 7 passes and still won by 10 points, right? Or 14 points. I mean, they still find ways to win. And right now, you know, as I've been saying all year, I'm in the Ric Flair camp, right? If you want to be the man, you got to beat the man. And right now, nobody's beating the man. Winnipeg is just so strong in every aspect. They can win games with special teams. They can win games, with defense. They can win games with offense. They do have weaknesses. I mean, there's still questions about their kicking game, but that has improved this year. I mean, last year they had to go out and get Sergio Castillo to kind of seal the deal, and it was a great move because he kicks 5 field goals in the Grey Cup game. Their run game is still a little bit suspect, although great game last week, right? But that has not been Andrew Harris level, right? But what team does have Andrew Harris in his prime kind of levels of a run game? So there's still issues there, but they're just so good. They're just so good all around. And they lose guys and they bring guys in, right? You know, Lawler signs with Edmonton, they bring in Schoen, they sign Ellingson, and they don't seem to lose a beat at all. So they're just a really, really good football team right now.
Well, to be the man, we've also had the woman as well, too. So, Kristina, thank you so much for joining us. Dan, also, Morley, just a fantastic stuff from you guys here on this week's podcast, here on the CFL This Week. Kristina, where do we find you?
You can find me on CFL.ca or on Twitter, which is at @Costabile1.
Dan?
Nowhere. I'm off this week. No, you'll find me back at BMO on Saturday to watch the first of 4.
Right on. And Morley, where do we find you if you want to contact you?
I was off last week, but I'm going back to work this week. So begins tomorrow, morning sports on 6:30. Ched, all the play-by-play for all the Elks games right now. And you can hit me up on Twitter at Morley_Scott.
We love talking CFL, and we just had another great podcast discussing the weekly happenings in the Canadian Football League. Folks, thank you so much for joining us again. Every Monday, we got new stuff, new content, new host, everyone, new opinions, and new questions that I'm just going to throw to the panel as well, too. So thank you for joining us here. Again, catch us on your favorite podcast catcher, and if you like seeing the faces of everyone, we are on YouTube. Like and subscribe to the podcast. We much appreciate it. Folks, this has been the CFL This Week on the Ticats Audio Network. Enjoy the game.
The CFL This Week with Bubba O'Neil. Subscribe, like, and get the deepest takes on Canada's game every Monday.